The mountains of Maine are the wildest mountains in the East. This conference and the last conference that happened 34 years ago, I guess now, were designed to focus attention on the mountains of Maine, the uniqueness of the mountains of Maine, the science and ecology of the mountains of Maine. First, we're going to educate 200 people today and tomorrow, maybe a few more than that. And then hopefully those people will deliver the message to the wide world.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Saddleback, which has a climate of its own.
The proceedings of that first conference were available, and I found them in the Maine State Library. And they got it out of their vault. They told me I could not take it from the library, but I could photocopy it. So I started photocopying this manuscript, and as the copies were coming out, I was reading it, and it was fascinating. You're right, the then head of the Land Use Regulation Commission was quoting poetry, opening the conference up. It's like, wow, you know, in 1972, there was a whole different mindset towards how important the mountains were. And the Land Use Regulation Commission had been newly formed, and there seemed to be a momentum where, unfortunately, now the Land Use Regulation Commission is really just seems to be a permitting agency. And people come to them and they say, we want to get a permit and we're going to have to rezone the mountains or rezone the wetlands. And how can we do this? And they have a staff that tells them how.
I was on the steering committee that helped kind of create the idea of coming back at this critical time with a Maine Mountain Conference, and it was wonderful to be a part of that process. I feel that this is very timely with new development issues facing the Western Mountains in particular right now. And I feel that the conference, just the fact that so many people have turned out for this conference is a real testament to how much people care in this state. They have personal relationships with the mountains. They understand that we're really at a pivotal turning point in Maine, that what we love about it could be lost forever.
This is why I think the 2,700 feet came into being, but I'm sure that there's other reasons why it did, is that we kind of found a distinct break in slope on Sugarloaf at about 2,700 feet. The most interesting piece that we found was that the organic material within the soil, particularly what we consider easily extractable, readily available, easily to break down, increased significantly.
My understanding is that there was a decision that none of the lurk Land Use Regulation Commission staff would be here today at the conference, which I think is a real shame. If you look at the 1972 conference, Maine Mountains Conference, LERC staff, Alec Giffen, for example, was on the agenda. And LERC Commission members were involved with the conference. That LERC is one of the key constituents, one of the key audiences for this kind of conference. And, you know, they can read the transcript after the fact, but it's not the same as being here. I think it's really a shame that there was a decision made, to, I guess, to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest.
On April 1972, the groundbreaking Maine Mountain Conference we are here trying to replicate was held. Ken Curtis had in 1972 assembled a mountain planning committee. Its goal, as expressed in the Maine Sunday Telegram a week before the conference, was, quote, to devise a plan to prevent Maine mountains from going the way of the Maine coast before it was too late.
None of our presenters, with one or two exceptions, are politicians. I mean, they're scientists. They're people who have spent their lives studying the mountains, looking at the plants of the mountains and the animals and the creatures and the soils. This is not a political conference.
But in the state of Maine, because of all the glacial ice ages that we've had, the last of which left around 10 to 12,000 years ago, most of our soil parent material is something that was deposited through the action of water and glaciers. And this is an example of what something might have looked like back after the glacier first left.
No one's ever mentioned where all the water in those aquifers in the valleys actually comes from. The mountain environment is the source of those waters, but what happens if we jeopardize the mountain environment, whether from airborne mercury, from power plants, or surface threats like erosion and sedimentation?
The mountains, because they have a thick organic cover, there's very little runoff in their natural state. So most of the water, whether it's snow melt or rainfall, infiltrates into the ground and moves through the soil, which means it's cleaner and it's cooler. And if you disturb things, you remove the organic matter, you do some development, there's going to be more runoff. The water will be a superficial feature, which means it won't be cold, it won't be as clean. You'll dry up some of the streams and wetlands, and you'll overwhelm some of the streams and wetlands where the water is deposited in that concentrated flow form. So that's my perspective.
Grasses and sedges bend with the wind. They don't try and stay upright in the wind that we have around there. And their buds grow at or below ground level. So these unique growing conditions make for plants that are uniquely suited for this kind of habitat. And because this kind of habitat, because alpine habitat is rare in Maine, as a consequence, many of the plants that grow in these habitats are also rare.